But first, what an absolute joke. The next federal election should be in the bag for the coalition, and indeed would be in the bag for the coalition if they had simply stuck to their guns and done exactly what they did at the last election, which is let Labor, and in particular the leading luminaries of the Labor Party, make complete gooses of themselves over climate change, as they invariably do. It was at the last election that Bill Shorten tripped all over himself trying to avoid explaining how much his insane climate change policies would cost.
Answering the question, Mr. Shorten.
Oh, OK. I'm going to give someone else a go. Dan.
When can people know, Mr. Shorten, the cost of the economy? You didn't answer the question.
Do you know what, John? I'm going to go to the next person.
Answer the question. That's why we're here to ask questions, and you're not answering the question.
Dan.
When can people expect to know, Mr. Shorten, the cost of the economy?
All right, Dan.
Game, set and match. That was the moment Shorten lost the election. Shorten also made a fool of himself over electric vehicles, which became something of a standing joke. And of course, who can forget Chris Bowen's famous clunker, the franking credits policy, basically penny pinching from the elderly, which was his great idea to win the election, and of which he was so confident he boasted, "If you don't like Labor's policies, don't vote for us." Sound advice. Well, speaking of clunkers, here's that same leading light of the Labor Party. But now, instead of trying to flog his dodgy superannuation franking credits scam, Chris Bowen is now parading around like a Parramatta second-hand used car dealer. All he needs is the balloons and the bunting. When asked 5 times yesterday by Lee Sales on the ABC about how soon the average punter would be able to afford an electric car, one of the centrepieces of Bowen and Albanese's grand scheme to destroy our economy. Sorry, I mean to reach net zero emissions in order to save the planet. Right. Well, Bowen bizarrely revealed that his policy is based on second-hand cars.
Let's take one of the best-selling cars in Australia this year, the Hyundai i30. It costs about $25,000 if you buy a new one. What's your best prediction under a Labor government as to when I would be able to buy that equivalent-sized car for $25,000 but electric?
Well, our policy is the electric vehicle tax cut, the main lever that we're pushing. We have a couple of electric vehicle policies, including electrifying the Commonwealth fleet, which is important because that will then flow through to second-hand sales about 3 years later, which is very important.
Yeah, but sorry, Chris, to cut you off, but you're talking in a way that the average person is just going over their heads. I just want to know, like, when can I buy an electric car for $25,000?
Well, our tax cut, which is the policy that we'll apply, will take roughly, say, $2,000 off the cost by the tariff reduction, and for a business, $9,000 off. And a business is just important, apart from the fact that around 50% of car sales are fleet, it then flows through again to the second-hand market, so you get more affordable second-hand electric vehicles about 3 years later.
They cost like $70,000 to get a Tesla Model 3.
Yeah, those ones do.
That should be the moment that Labor lost the next election. Just think this through. First, this elitist Labor MP, who has clearly spent way too long going round the roundabouts in Canberra inside the luxuriant Canberra bubble, wants to spend a fortune of your money on a whole fleet of brand new, shiny electric Commonwealth cars to chauffeur him and his new Labor government ministers and their eco-hangers-on and their renewables carpetbaggers all around Canberra and Sydney and Melbourne. And then, 3 years later, buy a whole new fleet so that the old ones can all be flogged off on the second-hand market to poor little peasants like you and me to hopefully pick one up. How generous of them. And then the second tranche of Bowen's brilliant second-hand clunkers plan is to get all those wealthy harbourside mansion people and squillionaire renewables, hedge fund investors in the eastern suburbs and elsewhere, and all those overpaid public servants to get tax cuts on their electric vehicles so again they can dump them in 3 years' time to those miserable working-class dregs who have to rely on buying second-hand cars. Has there ever been a more arrogant, a more elitist, a more self-important and a more out-of-touch group of people than the leadership of the modern Labor Party? If the Liberal Party can't run rings around these clowns, heaven help them. But, as I shall mention later in the show, there is one tiny group of individuals who have made it near impossible for the Libs to attack Labor on anything. What a shame. Still, I can see it now, halfway down the Parramatta Road. Bowen's bumper EV bargains, discount clunker yard. Drive away now and save the planet.
Would you buy a used car from this man?
Here at New Deal Used Cars, we are stripping away inflation. I want you to look inside. No, I don't want to look inside. Oh, just get in the car. Get in there. Get in.
Well, these people did. Used Cars, about a group of dedicated businessmen who'll do anything to sell a car.
As I said, it should be a doddle for the Libs to win the next election.